You ready? Yes. Yep. All right. We are ready. Here we go. Okay. I don't know how many of you already read the reading. Oh my, there's the man. Hey, how's it going? Are you going to be in here tonight? Ay, 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 ay. Man, oh man. Everybody, this is Skip Moment, and everybody in the room already knows you. We watched one of your videos not long ago, and they know you, but they don't know you. So anyway, you're on, and the reading... He doesn't want to be on. Why don't we meet and greet one another? A couple minutes. Well, is that all you learned? What did you learn? Did you learn anything in the reading that made you wonder what in the world is going on with this? Did anybody actually read the reading out of the Torah? Be honest. You will. All right. Well, we'll work our way through and see what happens here. Okay? Now, in our readings, there's more than one. And remember, sometimes they put them together. Sometimes there's more than one reading at once. But it is not a long reading. All right? And where we look in the beginning is Numbers 30, where we read, whenever a man makes a vow to Adonai or Jehovah or swears an oath to obligate himself by a pledge, he is not to violate his word, but do everything coming out of his mouth. Okay? Stop right there. Stop looking at your notes. And let me ask, okay, when you hear that and when you read that, there ought to be a little light going off in your brain going, wait a minute. All right? Why? Yes. Well, yes. All right. How about that? How about the words of Yeshua? And remember, we have to ask. We don't know all the answers. We don't even know all the questions, right? But we need to look at when we're reading out of Torah or when we're reading the words of Yeshua or the words of Paul or any of the other writers of the Messianic writings, we need to ask if ever there's a word or a line that makes you go, wait a minute, that's not what's in Torah, then that ought to be a light going off, and it ought to be a light that makes you look a little deeper, right? Okay, we're going to go there in a minute, and we're going to look at an idea about the words of Yeshua, about this idea of vows. But in Torah, it is clear that a vow is the only vow that is to be made is in the name of Jehovah. Okay? But there's not one line in there that encourages us not to make any vows at all. It's this: when you make a vow to Jehovah or in Jehovah's name, then do what? Keep your word. Okay? That's what it's about, right? Keeping your word. All right, now, there are other reminders of this in Ecclesiastes. Here's an example. When you swear a vow to God, don't do what? Don't delay in doing it. Right? Okay? He takes no delight in fools. Pay what you vow. Okay? It is better that you not vow than to vow and not pay. Do you remember anybody in all of the Bible that did something like that? They made a vow, but they didn't really give what they had vowed. Who? Ananias and Sapphira. And how did that work out for them? Not very well, right? Okay. In Deuteronomy, it's even more clear, at least in English. All right, you must fear Adonai your God and serve him and swear by his name. Okay? So the idea that vowing or pledging is to only be by Jehovah's name and then keeping your word is an idea that is in Torah. Okay? But let's look at this idea of what it means in his name. Sometimes, like when we hear the words, you will not take the name of the Lord your God or Jehovah your God in vain or bring it to naught. And, when I was growing up most of my life, what that meant is you were never ever would you use the name God in a way that was not appropriate. But remember, God is not a name, is it? Okay? So what do you do with that? What it meant is, people that go around GT this, GT that, we don't do this because it's in the word. We're not to take his name in vain. Well, I'm not suggesting that it's nice or good to go around and do that, but I am suggesting that that isn't what it means, taking his name in vain. Doesn't mean that at all. Okay, number one, his name is Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. Sometimes we use Jehovah, sometimes we use Yahweh. You have one guy over here says he knows, he's 100% certain it's Jehovah. You have somebody else over here, they're 100% certain it's Yahweh. Whenever I look at one guy and another guy and both of them are 100% certain, then I know what? Either one of them is wrong or both of them are wrong. Okay? And the bottom line is we don't really know. Okay? Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, we are used to using the name Jehovah. Okay? And we'll use that tonight. But what does it mean that we bring his name to naught? What does it mean to take his name in vain? Okay, what do you think that means? How's that, Don? Not walking in his ways. All right, taking his name. Remember, the name in Hebrew, Shem, of an individual is like representative of who they are. It's their character. So the idea is if you are going to be, and I am going to be a representative of Jehovah, then we need to represent him well. And the way we do that is we walk in his ways. And one of his ways is be a man or a woman of your word. Okay, so the line that we read in the Sermon on the Mount from Matthew. Okay, again, you've heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but carry out your oaths to Adonai. Okay, but I tell you, do not swear at all. Not by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is the footstool of his feet. Where does that idea originate in the scriptures? Where do you hear that heaven is his, the earth is his, heaven is his throne, and the earth is his footstool? Okay, do you know where? Psalm? Isn't that Isaiah? Isn't that in Isaiah? Yeah. Okay. Or by Jerusalem. It is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make a single hair white or black, although children might be able to do that. Make your hair white or black, I'm convinced. Okay, but let your word yes be yes and your no be no. Anything more than this is from the evil one. Okay, now remembering that Matthew is a Greek translation of a Hebrew document, all right, and looking at some of the older Hebrew manuscripts, we learned that there's a word that is not in the Greek and English that is in some of the Hebrew documents, and that is the word falsely. Okay, where Yeshua would be saying, do not swear falsely, okay, at all. And that makes complete sense. Now, there's a quote in there from Rood, Michael Rood. He's one of the guys that looked at this Hebrew and learned that in the modern Greek text, they had omitted the word falsely, okay? And you remember that the religious leaders, the Pharisees, all right, hey, guys, how's it going? Welcome. Welcome back. You here one day or one evening, or you're moving to here, to Anchorage, right? No? All right, well, anyway, glad you're here. Welcome back. You remember that the religious leaders in Judaism, the Pharisees, had added, okay, law after law after law. All right, and we learned a little bit about the oral law, the oral Torah, and what that was. And we learned that one of the words of the additions that they made is takanot, which is like an added, think of it as an added rule. All right, and you can go back and think of it like this, and this is a little bit simplistic, but it helps. All right, if you have a rule about Shabbat, okay, what does Jehovah say about Shabbat? Okay, remember it. How do you remember it? You observe it, you what? Okay, set it apart. It's a day that isn't like any other day. What else? Easy. Rest. Okay? Now, you and I might ask, rest, what does that mean? Because that's what I always do. I always ask, what does that mean? Because I don't know. What does that mean, rest? Well, in Torah, in the day when it was written, rest meant something in that world. Maybe rest doesn't mean exactly that now because we don't live in that world. Okay, so you have this picture of a guy that goes out and gets wood on Shabbat, right? And what happens? Okay, so we look at that and we go, oh my goodness, it's winter in Alaska and I have wood in my backyard and I'm heating my house with a gas, a wood stove. Maybe I'm not allowed. Okay, and the moment you begin to use that language, what are you doing? You are making a word into a rule. Okay? And you got to watch that. That doesn't mean that we're going to look at Shabbat and go, well, Shabbat doesn't mean anything. We're not going to keep Shabbat. No, it's a lot more meaningful than a rule. If it's a rule, you're not keeping it anyway. Rest in Him. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that's about it. Do not do your normal work. Okay, that's the idea. In other words, I want you to rest, and not only you. Who else rests on Shabbat? your dog, your camel, your servant, or your employees on down the line. We know a man, you know a guy, actually more than one. We know more than one fishermen that go out with their boats every year on the bay, and they bring in hundreds of pounds, thousands of salmon, and that is their job. Has anybody ever been out there and done that? Okay, commercial fishing. Okay, you have. Dana, why doesn't that surprise me? It was a mistake. What I learned is that those guys work all day, every day, often 20 hours a day, every day of the week, because they got to bring it in. They got to bring it in. They got to bring it in. Well, we have a couple of captains in our congregation, and people always want to know, well, what do I do? And I usually look at people and say, I don't know what you do. Tell you what I do. All right. What I would suggest that you do is, why don't you ask Jehovah what he wants you to do, and then do it. See how it works. 2 of them, all right, came back. They said, you know what we did? We let our crew know we're not gonna work on Shabbat. We're not gonna go fishing on Shabbat. And the crew, thought the captains had lost their minds. They were like, what do you mean? We're not going to get enough. We're not going to get enough money. What happened? They got more than they've ever gotten. Both of them. And they don't even hardly know one another. So it's not like these captains got together and said, hey, let's not. No, they were just felt like that was something they had to do, so they did it. Okay? So, but anyway, the idea is rest and remember. Okay? There is a book, I know Skip knows about it. And has read it because he's very familiar, more than I am, with Abraham Heschel. And has anybody read his book on Shabbat? It's really beautiful. You know, he's a Jewish rabbi. I believe that he's no longer alive. Is that right? Yeah. But he was one of the most famous rabbis of our era. And his words on Shabbat, I read the beginning of what his family did when they were growing up. And for me, I just started weeping. And the reason I wept is I was like, wow, I wish I would have done that when my kids were little. But I didn't know. I didn't know any better. But it's a beautiful day. And anyway, if you want to get that book and read it, you can order it online. It's not a lot of money, and it's a great book. What's the name of the man? Abraham, Heschel. And the name of the book is Sabbath. So, listen, at any moment, if anybody, like Skip or anybody else, wants to jump in and derail me, please, you know that you're allowed to do that. So, okay, so you have this idea. I want you to rest. So, years later, you have the Jews that were not many that came back into the land after Babylon. And what did they do? They began making rules. Why? Was it because they were evil and they wanted to be evil and go against Torah? Well, I don't know. I don't know exactly what motivations are, but I would guess one of the reasons why is they were thinking we don't ever want that to happen to us again, so we better be certain that we keep this Torah, and we're going to make rules around the rules, okay, known as making a fence around the rules so that we're absolutely certain that you never break it, okay? So that means now on Shabbat, we're going to make a list, and they're going to be the authorized version, all right, of the list of what you are allowed and not allowed to do on Shabbat. And it grows and grows and grows and grows down to how many steps you're allowed to walk outside of your house. And hundreds of other rules like that, okay? Now, if you are a Jew living in Yeshua's day, What does that do to your life, to your walk? Okay, stifles it. All right. Anybody else? What does it do? Now you, as a Jew in the day, maybe you don't own the Tanakh. Okay, where do you go in order to learn Torah? The synagogue, run by whom? Who runs that? Rabbis. What are they? Are they Sadducees? No, they're Pharisees. Okay? They are, if you want, the rule makers. And they're making these rules. Now, whether they're making these rules because they're thinking, we're going to be evil and we want to be in power, and we're going to, when things like this happen in the world, they happen gradually. Okay? Has anybody noticed a gradual slide into more of a power-hungry world? Maybe in our own world? Right? COVID gave it a bump, but it was already moving in that direction, and it moved more rapidly as you got into it. Begins slow, moves rapid. Anyway, that's a rabbi trail. But so now you have all of these rules that are there, and they're weighing you down, and you don't know the difference in what is Torah and what is a rule of the elders or the tradition of the elders, because it has been elevated to where it's at least equal to and most likely even over Torah and the Word of God. Well, thank goodness we've never done that in Christianity. We are people of the book. We believe the Bible. The Bible is the inerrant Word of God, and we follow the Bible. And can anybody think of an example where we have believed that we were following the Bible, and then we learned, wait a minute, that isn't in there? Okay, what? How's that? Oh, Sunday. There's a great example. David. Thus Jesus declared all foods clean. Okay, what else? Easter. Oh, you had to bring that up. Christmas. Ay. Wow, radicals you are. Okay? Skip.
I agree with what you say, but I think we need to add one little piece.
Yes.
And the piece is that in the first century, remember when Yeshua says, when they sit in the seat of Moses, follow what they, listen to what they say.
Yes.
Do it. Just don't do it the way that they do, right? Don't be hypocritical, but follow the teachings when the authority sits in the chair of Moses.
Okay.
So clearly he meant that the teaching that say a rabbi would give, when it was in line with Torah, which is what the rabbi
Yes.
was supposed to do, was something that you were supposed to follow. What he complains about is the hypocrisy of those who teach one thing but do something else.
Yes. Okay, hold on. Thanks. Can you hand the mic back there to Skip? We have some people online, and they need to hear you.
Oh, okay. Is this working now?
Hold it up a little.
Is it working now?
Perfect.
Okay. So what I was going to say is, I don't think that in general you can say that the rabbis were interested in a power grab, because a rabbi actually doesn't run a synagogue. A synagogue has a president,
Yes.
and officers and stuff. The rabbi is there to help interpret the meaning of Scripture when there's a question,
Okay.
right? Because he's basically the one who has done the study enough to be able to discern what these various teachings mean. And the problem, of course, is that when you have only Torah, there are lots of gaps. So the Torah will tell you, as you perfectly well gave the example, you should remember and rest on Shabbat. Okay? But of course, that doesn't help you understand what that all means. So now you go to the rabbi who should help you understand what the meanings of those words are for the kinds of activities that you can engage in Shabbat. And not because he's interested in a power situation, but because he's trying to help the people understand why they should do these things rather than something else. And the motivation behind that you clearly indicated, which was when they came back from Babylon, the last thing they wanted was to go back into captivity as a result of doing something that would offend or violate one of the commandments. Okay? So the rabbis take the position that I'm going to help you understand this. And Yeshua basically tips his hat to them by saying, those people who sit in the seat of Moses, which was the seat of authority, listen to what they say and do it. But don't pay attention to the hypocrisy in the way that they act. So clearly he's giving authorization to the way that people understood the behavior that they should follow as a result of the interpretation of the rabbi from Torah. And have you talked about Agidah and Halakha?
No, hold on one second. Oh, a little bit. Hey, hello in the booth. Jacob, can we have a little more on the handheld? Just a little more volume? Thank you.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So the rabbis basically make two decisions, and you can see it in the Pauline writing. Halakha is an interpretation that ultimately must be derived from Torah itself, right? So if I give you halakha, that means I can show you how a verse in the Torah actually supports what I'm telling you. And then the rabbis have what they call agidah, which is opinion.
Right.
It's like, okay, so I think you should do this, but it's my opinion, and if you want to do something else, you can, right?
Like what I do a lot.
Yeah, so halakha is binding
Yes.
on the community. Agidah is not. And what we need to remember is that the people in the community could decide which synagogue they wanted to go to based on their understanding of their own interpretation in relation to the halakha of the rabbi of the synagogue. So, for example, if I don't like what the rabbi is telling me in the community, I go to another one. Right? I have the ability to do that because, after all, what is a synagogue? Basically a quorum, 10 males that make up a synagogue. So in a village bigger than Montepulciano, I can go to another synagogue and see if his teaching is more in line with my own spirit. Right? So I have that option. So it's not a matter of me trying to enforce the ruling. It's a matter of me trying to help you understand the ruling. And Yeshua does the same thing. He acts in that regard as a rabbi by interpreting Torah. Remember the passage in Matthew where he says, "You've heard it said, but I say unto you." So all he's really doing is rabbinic interpretation of the verse. So maybe that helps a little bit.
Thank you. And something else that we need to remember, and it's very easy to make everything general. Like you have this idea, all of the Pharisees were bad and did all of this adding to the rules, and that is not true. Okay, they weren't all doing that. There were a lot of them that were followers of Yeshua. Okay, but there were a lot of them that were not, and that he comes into disagreement with. Go ahead, Kathy.
I had a knee-jerk reaction when you said that Yeshua tipped his hat to them. Yeah. So since I've been here, I just kind of understand that the ones that are outspoken and that were out to get him and that didn't like his teaching and didn't like anything, he was constantly calling them names, pointing out who they are. So my knee-jerk reaction, I didn't see any hat tipping by Yeshua to them. That's all.
Make a comment on that?
Bring it back. Yeah.
So the point is that Yeshua's commentary on the Pharisees that he interacts with is usually about their hypocrisy. In other words, as he says, they would say one thing, but they do something else. And if you look at the rabbinic material from the same period, you will see that within the Pharisaic community, there are other Pharisees who are saying the same thing. They're saying exactly the same thing. We need to be more consistent. We need to be have integrity here, and they would call out each other on the same issues. So it isn't like Yeshua is saying, oh, all you Pharisees are bad. He's not saying that at all. What he's saying is those Pharisees who are being hypocritical and teaching one thing, as he said, you place burdens on people that no one can carry, right? Okay? So, but you won't lift a finger to help someone, right? So he's very critical of their hypocrisy, but not critical of their interpretation of the Torah when it's aimed at trying to help people understand what behavior they should have. Does that help?
Well, it does, except that what they were doing, what they were saying with their mouth was an undue burden, and that was very clear.
That's right. What he was saying is, when they see, the idea is the seat of Moses. Seat of Moses is a place of authority. And he's saying, listen to what they say, because now they're giving you halakha, which is the interpretation of Torah for your behavior. So you'd be consistent with what Yehovah wants, okay? Right. But don't pay attention when they start acting hypocritically, because their behavior doesn't reflect what Moses taught, right? Okay? And the point is that there are other rabbis who are doing the same thing, are criticizing their own group.
So what I'm wondering is, are there rules or rulings that they made that are against the meaning of Torah?
I'm sorry, that what?
Are there rulings made by the religious leaders that are undermining Torah,
yeah,
even though they may believe what they're doing is right?
Certainly that's the case, but then we have to look at which groups and why they would do that, as you suggested, right? I mean, the best example that you can get from the apostolic writings are the Sadducees and the Pharisees, their argument over resurrection. So which one of those undermines Torah? Well, it depends. If you believe that only the first 5 books are Torah, then you have to side with the Sadducees. If you believe that Torah includes all the prophets and the writings, then you have to side with the Pharisees. But now it comes down to a theological argument. So it's much more complicated than we want it to be.
It is. Say that again.
It's much more complicated than we would like it to be, because in Christian circles, you're taught that the Pharisees are the bad guys, the Sadducees are even worse, and you should just follow the Christian teachings of Paul, right? But in fact, the actual social environment of the first century is much more complicated, with lots of splinter groups, lots of differences in opinion. There is no uniformity in Judaism in the first century. What synagogue do you go to? Oh, you go to the one in Eureka, and I go to the one in Anchorage, and my rabbi teaches this, and your rabbi teaches that. Which one's right? Well, which one do you like? Right?
Oh.
I mean, it becomes there are some fundamentals, like there's one God, okay? But the behavior depends on the synagogue, the context, the people. All that kind of stuff is going on, just like it.
Get that mic going there.
Well, I'm just saying. That was a threshing. That you can't do stuff like that. All I'm saying is that the way that reaction was, you said he had to their teaching. Their teaching was totally against Torah, and they didn't understand Torah. It's okay to do good on Sabbath. It's okay to eat. It's okay to make your meals. It's okay, but that's not what they were teaching. So that was my reaction. That's all. Okay.
And just one more, the last thing.
Who will have
there's
the last
There's a terrific
word.
book. There's a terrific book called, I'm trying to remember the name of it now, Meet the Rabbis, okay? And the author is, I can't remember, well-known scholar in this area. And in the book, Meet the Rabbis, he helps you see that there are rabbis who are actually, Pharisees, rabbis, who are actually teaching exactly the same thing that Yeshua taught. Right? So Yeshua's argument is with the hypocrisy of the rabbis, not with the orthodoxy of the teaching. And in fact, many of Yeshua's parables were already being taught by the by the Pharisees. Many of the interpretations of the Torah were already being taught by the Pharisees 100 years before Yeshua even showed up, right? So it's not Yeshua against the Pharisees. It's Yeshua against those members of the Pharisees who were being hypocritical or who were undermining Torah. Okay?
Good.
And by the way, it's no different than us.
That's exactly
it
right.
Is it any
is
different
us.
today?
No.
It's exactly the same, right? Yeah. So.
Yeah. The reason you all are here is you like me.
And
Some of you, not all of you, but
and don't we tend to find a church that teaches like what we have always been taught instead of digging in the scriptures and finding out,
well, yes, and that's a lot easy. It's a lot easier. Not, digging is not easy. It's really hard work, and you don't always end up where you want to end up, right? But anyway, okay. Let's run the mic over yonder. Brad Young. Yep, great. I have one of his books.
Like Pat said,
Brad Young.
people.
Hold that up.
Okay.
There you go.
Like Pat said, people tend to follow or go to churches that teach a doctrine that they believe in, and not the truth. Like the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they would teach the Word of God, but their living would show differently. So, and we do that too because we're human.
Yep.
But
Right.
it's
But
not.
I think one of the other elements of it with us is we have learned that what matters more than anything else is what you believe in your mind about ideas about God and the Bible. Okay? That's what really matters. I mean, isn't that what Christianity in general believes? The way that you get saved is you agree to these ideas about Jesus, right? In your mind. Once you've done that, then you're in, okay? Then most everything is about all of these beliefs and what they are and having the right ones, all right? And nobody ever bothers to ask, but how do I live? What do I do with my life? Okay, what do I do when I leave on Monday? And anyway, that's where we are. So,
And
good.
thank God that He searches our hearts because He knows our heart.
And
you
what
know,
is your heart?
And our heart is to live for Him.
But what is your, in Hebrew, what does that mean? What is your heart?
Yeah, our heart is our mind.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
What's in our mind?
Your way of,
Yeah.
and your emotions and your mind and, without dividing them up into these little areas. But yeah, what is the thrust of who you are?
Yeah.
Right. Okay, well, you guys want to move on? Say anything else? All right. There are some other, you don't have to, no. You realize we love going down these roads, and we don't always know where we're going to go, and sometimes we don't end up doing the notes. I do the notes for those of you that are lazy, so that you'll be able to read a little bit, and every now and then one of you has the gumption enough to come up to me and go, hey, I read that note, and I don't think you're right. And I go, good, you read it. At least you're reading it, right? All right, now, let's move on a little bit. A couple of these other ideas in the reading. One of them is about a woman in her youth who makes a vow to Adonai or obligates herself by a pledge, all right? And the other one is if the woman is married, and in both of those situations, when a girl made a vow or a pledge, it was her husband or her father had to agree with it. Okay, is that what you read? And they were able to negate it, whatever that means. Okay, what vows would these be? What does that mean? What vows? And what does that mean to us today? Does that mean I rule over my wife? Do you know my wife? We don't rule over one another, right? It's the opposite in marriage. Marriage is not about ruling. How's that? Well, yeah, it's a partnership. That's right. How's that? That is what you meant to say. How long have you been married, Aaron? Almost 2 months. Right. Well, you're at least in the room. kind of getting there, all right? What is this about? Does anybody have any ideas about what this is about? With the women and the laws and the vows, and what does it mean? Why is it in there? Would it even be in there? Does it even mean anything to us today, where we are? Well, what was it like if you were a woman in the day of those that were the next generation coming out of Egypt, whose ancestors had been in the desert? What was it like to be a woman in that day? No matter if you were a Hebrew or you were a Canaanite, what did it mean to be a woman? What was the view of women, of a woman? David, where's the mic? Let's roll the mic over there. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people on Zoom and maybe more online. Go ahead.
Well, one thing to remember is that, too, at the end of that, those statements didn't apply to if you were divorced or if you were widowed. So you couldn't just rely on dad or your father in that situation.
Run that by me again. What was that?
Well,
you were divorced, but all right. What do you mean?
Well, concerning if a woman gives a vow, that her father or her husband can, once he hears of it, but if he lets it go. But in those days, it might have been a situation where somebody might have been forced, or because you were involved in that family and connected to that family, that they would want you to keep the vow that somebody else gave.
Okay. Like what?
I don't know.
All right. Go ahead.
Whatever it was.
I know you're dying to jump in, and I want you to jump in.
Okay, you need to read Avia Gottlieb Zornberg's book called Bewilderments, which is a commentary on the book of Numbers, and she spends a good chapter on exactly this text. Okay? It's if you don't know Zornberg's work, you need to get familiar with it. She's done basically Jewish commentaries on all 5 books of Moses now. I did a 5 or 6 month study of bewilderments online, so you can go find that on my website if you want. And we did basically we went page by page through her book and talked about her understanding what's happening in Numbers. Okay, so the point of this whole deal, as Dave was pointing out, is it's culturally contextual. So if you were, as you mentioned, if you were a woman in that patriarchal culture, you needed the protection and the authority of the male figure of the household in order for the vow to have validity in the community. Okay, so if we pull the verse out of its context, it looks like it says a husband or a father can negate the vow, but in fact, what it's talking about is applying the authority of the paterfamilias to the statement of the woman, so that it will have effect in the community, right? Without his, good housekeeping stamp of approval, it doesn't obligate the family. So if a woman says something, she still has to have that in that patriarchal culture. She would still have to have the stamp of approval of the man, the representative of the household, in order for it to have validity in the community. And that's only because it's a patriarchal culture. Our culture is different today,
Right.
as he will learn. It's an unequal partnership. And in fact, in very short order, he'll discover that she's really running things, and he's just agreeing. Okay? No, it's a partnership, but our version of the culture is completely different than what was happening, as you pointed
Yes.
out, of the generation that's coming out of Egypt.
Yep.
Right?
What are the vows? That's what we were.
What is a vow?
What type of a vow? What type of a vow would a female make back here?
Okay. So there's a really good example of the daughters. There's a really good example of daughters who come to Moses and ask for a special permission
Yeah.
for them to inherit land, because otherwise, when the father dies with no male offspring, the land would go back to the tribe, and they wouldn't have an inheritance. And it's really interesting because Moses says, okay, let me consult God on this. And when he comes back, he gives them the authority to inherit the land. So here's a question, or here's an example, flip side kind of a vow that was made for the family to have a stake in tribal land, but the woman, or the girl, the females, didn't have the authority to claim that land because of the patriarchal culture. So they had to go to Moses to get the authority necessary for them to actually inherit the land.
Good. Can you send the mic there to Aaron?
Oh, that's okay. It was just a jest.
Thank you, Skip. Thank you.
Would an example be with Samuel?
Hold it up.
Would an example be with Samuel being dedicated by his mom to the temple? Would that have been a vow that she made to dedicate? Lord, if you give me a baby, I vow to dedicate him to you and give him to the temple. And then could that have been overridden by her husband, but he chose not to?
Let me see. She makes the vow to the Lord, and he fulfills the obligation of the vow. So I don't think it's possible for the husband to override that, since the vow, that's not an economic decision, like inheriting the land. Does it impact the family? I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah.
We'll have to sort of
For
research
me, that
a
is
little bit.
maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe. Good idea. Well, yeah. Yeah. Think of a vow as your wife. This really doesn't work in our world, but
it's an
maybe we can
authorized
make it work.
promise. That's all
Yeah,
it is.
your
It's
wife
an authorized
goes
promise.
out and makes a mortgage in your name with you. You have the ability. You can go, no, we're not going to do that, or I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put my name on that. For you to go out and do that on your own. Okay? Now, running it back into the day when this was written and read, I don't know. But I think these are good ideas. Okay, you want to send the mic that way in car? I should get more than one mic. We'll have more than one when you're here. Friday. Yeah. Go ahead.
Can I ask that stupid question?
No.
No? Okay.
There are none.
Okay, if she says she's going to make dinner and doesn't make dinner, is that a vow?
No. No, I don't think that's the meaning of what we're reading in here about the vows. I don't think that's what that means. I think it means an obligation that I have taken on, and maybe I didn't think about all of everything that goes with it. And, my dad or my husband, once they learn about this vow, they're like, no, you're not going to do that. And then the guy over there that got the vow from me that's going to involve money, it's in Torah that I, as a husband or a father, can negate that vow, and then then the money doesn't have to be given because the vow's been negated in order to protect her.
Think about it. If it's an economic issue, think about it like this, okay? A woman in In this culture, makes a promise. The promise involves the family, because we're not talking about individuals here. We're talking about the smallest building block of the culture is the family. So if a daughter in the family makes a vow that has an economic impact on the family, it can only be authorized by the head of the family, who has to say yay or nay to the economic impact, right?
Yep.
Either the husband or the father, because it's a patriarchal culture. Okay? So a woman can make an authorized promise, but the authority has to come from the paterfamilias, because it's going to involve the whole family. It's not like today, where we make individual contracts, right? That doesn't happen in this culture. In this culture, the contract is with the family, not with the individual. Marriage is not an individual decision in this culture. Marriage is an economic decision that involves two families. So you can't have a contract, a vow, a promise, a contract, until the family also is in agreement, right? And if you don't believe that, I have an uncle named Guido who lives in Sicily. I mean, think about it. We do the same thing today, right? My wife is from a Sicilian background. You don't make promises without the whole family being involved, right? Same idea.
Good. And always remember, even though the husband may be the head, the wife is the neck. Turns the head. And then, where did we hear that? Originally? Where? Well, that's one, but I think earlier than that, there's another one. Tevye and his wife, right? Fiddler on the roof. So anyway, go ahead, Dana.
I have two questions. First one is, what's the last name of the lady that wrote the book about bewilderment? And how do you spell?
Zornberg. 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 You'll get it.
The one on Numbers is called
Bewilderments. That's a brilliant title.
Second
what else?
question is the lady that decided to give her son at a certain age to the temple.
Okay, hold it up. Can't really hear you.
The lady that decided
Yeah.
to give her son at a certain
Hannah.
age to Hannah.
Mm-hmm.
And who was her husband?
What was her husband's name?
Okay, my question about
I don't
that.
remember.
Well, my question about it is we already know who that guy was that went to the temple, right?
Okay.
We know who he was.
Uh-huh.
Is that true?
Uh,
The little boy that went to the temple was a very important
mean Eli?
subject. Yes.
no, Samuel.
We
Eli
know
was
who
already
he
there.
was.
Well, yeah, but this is earlier. Go ahead. Keep.
But my comment to it is we know who he was. To me, it would be very hard to understand that he did the things that he did when he was in the temple as the little boy and who he became without having the direction of the Father to make sure that it happened. That's kind of my thoughts on it. I know that's going backwards, but I'm pretty sure that he didn't just call 3 times, do you love me? And all of a sudden, what do you think, Samuel? You know, and then what happens to him after that and what he does for God. That's my comment.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Good. Okay. Next item. Thank you all very much. That was really good. Now let's look at the idea of, let me see, where are we? Vengeance on Midian. Okay, vengeance? All right, remember about the Midianites and the Moabites, and remember what happened when we read about, what's his name? Balak and Balaam, right? Okay, so now in Numbers 31, we read, Adonai spoke to Moses, saying, take vengeance on the Midianites for Banai Yisrael. Oh, and by the way, afterward you will be gathered to your people. What does that mean? You will be gathered. You're going to die when that is over. All right, and Moses then sent them into battle, 1,000 from each tribe, and with them Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the Cohen. And he took with him articles from the sanctuary and trumpets for signaling. Now, you remember that guy from last week's reading, right? He's the guy with the spear, right, in the stomach and the body and all that. All right, so he's going to go with him. And it was directly, his act was directly against the Moabites, who was the king of Moab, Balak. All right, he was the king of Moab. And what was it that what did Balaam do that got the Moabites in with, quotes, the Israelites? He gave them advice. And what was the advice? Send in the women. All right? We're not going to get them the way that you wanted to get them, which is me standing up and bringing a curse. And the reason is God won't let me. All right? But here's a way that you can get them. Send in the women. And woohoo! And that's what ended up happening, right? So now there's this vengeance that's going to happen. Okay? Now, remember, who are the priests? They are, if you want to use this word, and I'm going to use it, but I don't want you to hear it in our vernacular. They are the worship leaders in Israel, okay? And we think of that as, they had keyboards and all that, and that was involved later in the worship, absolutely, all right? But the idea is that the worship leaders are going to be involved in the battle against the Moabites and the Midianites and this vengeance, taking of vengeance, okay? Now, if you read ahead in the Tanakh, you have these examples of when Jehoshaphat, when he was against Moab and Ammon, and you read in Chronicles that he consulted with the people, and he appointed singers to Adonai, praising the splendor of his holiness, and they went out before the army, saying, praise Adonai, for his mercy endures forever. Okay? And that means that the worship leaders were involved. All right? And we read on, as they began singing and praising, Adonai set ambushes against the children of Ammon, Moab, and Mount Seir, who had come against Judah, and they were defeated. Okay? Now, I'm going to give you a very easy, simple line out of this. Praise and worship that is true matters. Okay? How does it matter? I don't know. I know that it matters. I know that being grateful is an act. It's not only an idea in your mind, all right? I think it's Dennis Prager brings up in one of his Torah books that gratefulness may be the number one attribute of anyone who is a follower of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay? When it isn't there, we know what happens. Okay? And it isn't good. Praise and worship is one way of expressing gratefulness. And they do it all over the world in different ways. I have been in church since I was a week old. Okay? And for all of my formative years, praise and worship involved music, okay, and it involved an organ. And it involved me making noise with my mouth, singing hymns, yada, 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 on and on, okay? Now, for however many last years, when I got involved in the modern movement of Christianity, then we moved into doing what we use the words praise and worship, which is like what we do. But not everybody does it the way that we do it. And that doesn't mean that the way we do it is the only way to do it, right? There's nothing wrong with the organ. I love the organ. We don't have one here. There was one in Italy. Remember when you brought us to that cathedral and the guy was on the organ, playing the organ, and Robert and I were just hearing him? Were you in that room? That was amazing. Okay? Now, what I want to know is if they had not gone out before the army in praise and worship, would Jehovah have set ambushes and would they have won? Okay? So here's like the danger in my mind. The danger is getting the idea that if you do X, then you know that Y is going to happen. Okay? Sometimes that's right. If you forgive someone who has hurt you, it is going to be better within you. There's no doubt. Okay? But here you have this example of if you praise and worship, then everything in your life is going to be right. Okay? Is that true? Oh, we still have battles, don't we? Okay, so don't take it the wrong way. Praise and worship matter, and they're glorious and they're beautiful. But it's easy to get the idea when you read this that you are able to use worship in order to manipulate God. No, I don't think it works that way at all. Okay, we don't worship Him out of what we get out of it. We worship Him out of what we give, out of what He deserves. Okay, and all of what we do, all of our actions, all of our life is worship. You have the idea. What's the Hebrew word? Is it avodah? The word avodah that means work, and it means worship, which means you are, by the way you live your life, you are able to be an act of worship. And everything you do can be an act of worship. Your work can be an act of worship. It can all be an act of worship, okay? And remember, the way that we live our lives is the way that we defeat the enemy, okay? By your worship, by how you live your life. All right? Does that mean that everything is always going to go the way that you want it to go? Does it sometimes go the opposite of what you want it to go? So what do you do then? Stop worshiping? No. Okay, so, all right, let's move on. Moses asked, by the way, you let all the women live? Well, isn't that interesting? Who were the women that he meant? The women who were the seducers of Israel, seducing them into worshiping idols, all right? You let all the women live? Why, they're the ones, because of Balaam's advice, that caused Banai Israel to be unfaithful to Adonai in the matter of Peor, so that the plague was on the community of Adonai. Now, this brings up the difficult subject of God and war. And the idea that I have heard, that's not the number one idea, but maybe the second idea of why people don't want to follow the God of the Bible, is all of the slaughtering that he had them do in the name of him. Right? And remember, when they went into the land, okay, the command wasn't kill them all. Right? It was kill this group But another group, it was just get them out of the land. Okay? So, sometimes we have the idea, well, when Joshua went in, his command was kill everybody in the land that isn't one of you. And that was not the command. However, there were groups in the land where Jehovah's words were, kill them all. Everybody and everything in there. Wipe it out. Okay? People can't handle that. Christians can't handle that. Why? Because what? Well, you're right. God doesn't like sin, but does he wipe you out? Did he wipe you out? No. Okay. Say that in the mic. Okay.
If we actually had met those people that burned their babies, you might have understood that.
That's right. Yeah. And remember, the warning that God gave them was, if you do not get rid of them out of the land, they're going to end up being what? They're going to be a sting in your side and a barb in your eyeball. Okay? In other words, they're going to affect the way that you live and your vision, the way that you view the world around you. If you begin to adopt their ideas and their gods and their idols, it's going to be bad news. And we know that's exactly what happened. They went in and they didn't wipe them all out. All right? But I want to go back to this idea. Gar, did you have your hand up? Can you bring Gar the mic or send it down that way?
Weren't these folks squatters?
Who? The ites?
The people that were there that God wanted out of the way, aren't they squatters?
Well, I don't know if you can look at it that way. Skip says no, absolutely not.
The Canaanites occupied the land before Israel showed up. The Canaanite kingdom was already established. Israel was the one that was the invading army. Right? They weren't squatters because they had been there for centuries, right? Yeah, from the time of the Egyptians, they were the empire of that region. So it's the Israelites who are the ones who are the aggressors and are trying to eliminate the indigenous population.
Ooh. Wow, that's even worse.
Yeah, but
So it is, and it is there. All right? And what we want to know is, why is it there? Why did they do that? And what does that have to do with us today? Patricia.
God wanted them wiped out because they worshipped other gods.
Okay, God wanted them wiped out because they worshipped other gods.
Yeah.
Okay? Let's keep that right here, and we'll deal with that in a second, okay? Patricia, or whoever has the mic that wants to say something.
Well, I think, too, in the modern Christian churches today, they preach God is love, Yeshua is love. They don't use Yeshua, but Jesus is love. And the Tanakh and the Torah aren't even in play anymore. So people don't even study those to find out the true word of God. So, everything, if you believe in Jesus, that's all you need to do. You never have to do nothing else. You can go do whatever you want, and you're good through the end. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right.
But I think that the land belongs to God, and he can give it to who he wants to give it to.
There is that. All right,
And
the land
he gave
belongs
Canaan, that land,
to
Israel.
Jehovah. Okay, and he made a promise, didn't he, to Abraham? Okay, but there's another element I want to bring up. Okay, and this is an idea that you read about as a warning to Israel. The warning to Israel is, if you too, this and this and this and this, like the ites did, what will happen? The land will spit you out. Okay, so there's more going on here than God going, I don't like those guys because they're bad and I want to get rid of them. There's more going on that has a lot to do with life on earth right now. and the way that we live our life on earth right now. And the reality is, this is the way I view it, so this is me, this is my opinion on the matter, is that as Christianity has developed this idea of the nice Jesus, okay, the loving Jesus, we have lost touch with the reality of life. Okay? The reality of life is there are those in the world right now that if they had the opportunity, you would not be here. You would be dead. They would wipe you out. Okay? If our vision of God and life with God is all about heaven and where you go when you die, then what difference does it make? If you get wiped out, so what? So what? Right? Because you know, this world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. All right? But is that what you read? Is that the way that you read about God's vision or agenda in Torah? Is that it? I want everybody to go to heaven when they die. No. Okay, what is it about? Well, okay. Okay, go. Yes, that is right. But what I have in mind is going back to what went on in the garden. So what went on in the garden? You had, not at the original commandment that was given in the garden. What was it? Say it. The mic is not on. Click. There you go. What was the original command in the garden?
Take dominion, yeah. Occupy, dominion, take dominion over the land and make it.
Everything on the earth.
And everything on the earth.
Do the earth. Bring it under God's control, if you will. Why did that need to be done? What was the earth like in Genesis 1? Chaos. Okay? And what happened in Genesis 1 with the light and the stars and the animals and all of that? What was that? That was order out of chaos. Okay, so then Jehovah creates a man in his image, which is a whole other teaching that you guys have already heard a lot about. A man in his image, or human beings in his image, in order to take over the earth and bring order out of chaos. Okay, when did that command end? When was it negated? When was it all about heaven and no more about what's going on the earth right now in your life and in your world?
It wasn't.
It wasn't. Okay, that was never negated. Okay, so that means there are realities that were true then that are exactly like realities that are true now. And sometimes that's really, it's hard for us to think about that. Because, I know people that I helped raise, that I raised in this mindset of love and grace and, we know what love and grace means around here, but it doesn't mean what we used to believe it meant, right? But then when things arise that are really hard, people don't want to deal with it. Now, I gave a quote from a writing by a guy named Skip Moen in my little outline here. And, and whether or not I used it in the right way, you might be able to comment on that. But one of the readings recently that really grabbed me was when you wrote in 2020, which was at the beginning of COVID. All right? And I read this and I was like, holy smokes. This is exactly where we are in America. And in that article, you were looking at the book by Lee Harris, Civilization and Its Enemies, The Next Stage of history. Now, did I get your idea right in this quote and how I used it? So the idea is, he writes, I may be wrong, but it seems to me that this is exactly where America stands today. Our moral heritage, the confluence of the Ten Commandments and the Christian ideals of peace and love, modified by the Enlightenment, very important, stand in the way of defending the very civilization that made these ideals possible. Yikes. Okay? So the terms racist and bigot are powerful political words. Listen, they have zip to do with reality. The way that they're being used today has nothing to do with reality. They are political words like hundreds of others that are being thrown away now, and all they have to do, they don't have to be true, they only have to make us feel guilty. Okay? Someone I read wrote about America's core wound, slavery, of course, but frankly, that's bull-oni. Love it. Okay? America's core wound is passively accepting the utopian morality that prevents us from fighting against those who seek to destroy our culture. Okay? It's an old story. The same thing happened in Rome. In fact, it's even older than the Roman Empire. Biblical Israel demonstrates the same path to extinction. Okay? So the idea is assimilate with the world around you and you will die. Right? On the other end of that, if you have developed a culture where the values of the commandments may be lived out, and you do not assimilate those that enter in through your world, all right, then you're doomed, which is exactly what has happened in our nation. People here from all over the world. There's nothing wrong with that. All of us are from all over the world. Did anybody have relatives that were from North America 1,000 years ago? Or do most of you originate somewhere else, right? Okay, you? Yeah? You want to say more about that? Christy? Aleut, there you go. So it happens, all right? But the idea is no longer are we assimilating others to the values of morality that my grandparents had, and we're letting them be their own, okay? Bring their own culture and not assimilate to ours. There's nothing wrong with bringing elements of your own culture and background. Great, awesome, we'll celebrate those. But there is a foundation. So I remember in 2005-ish, and I was, what was I teaching? It wasn't geology, it was something else. I think it was history, a group of high schoolers. And I asked about the word, and I asked if they'd ever heard of the word multiculturalism. How many of you know that word and what that means? Okay? I remember I wrote that word on the board, and I was like, that right there is going to bring about the death of America and everything that you know. Okay? Because at the bottom line of it was this idea. Every culture is equal in value and, if you want to use the word, morality. Okay? Or there's not one culture that is better than another. Is that true? No. How do you know? Other than reading the Bible, how do you know that? Is every culture in the world equivalent, equal in value? or equally good. In other words, I can't look at natives of a region in Africa, and I'm not allowed to judge their culture because they're all equal. Now, in their culture, they happen to do circumcision of women and rape and a bunch of other things, but that's just their world. So that's all right, right? No, it isn't. So they're not all equal. So, anyway, that's the idea, and that's the idea of this, I believe, the idea of what we just read. Okay? And I think it is expressed when we read about Israel going into the land and getting rid of all those ites, getting rid of them. Okay? It's not about, it's about, look, if you don't do something about this, you're not going to make it. Is that where we are? So what do? Vote. I know there's a lot that you guys are involved in, and I'm proud of us for being involved. Go ahead, Tana.
My question is where did the Canaanites come from? And did God give the Canaanites the land that they were on?
Came from Noah.
So my idea of it is that they were at one point in time walking correctly, and then later on God says, they're not making it. It looks like I'm going to have to bring someone in to mess them up because they're not making it.
Okay, so had that ever, this idea of going into the land and getting rid of the immoral, godless, idol worshippers, had that ever happened earlier than Israel going into the land and getting rid of the ites? No, the Moabites. Earlier than that, you have Noah, right? You have the ark. You have Jehovah looking at the world and going, well, we're done. Enough is enough. We're going to wash it out. And then when he washes it out, then you have who are Noah's offspring?
Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
Shem, Ham, and who?
Japheth.
Japheth, okay. And who was Ham's? Who was Noah's grandson through Ham? Canaan. The ites, all right? If you want to read the history that way, it works. There are the ites, all right? What did Noah know? What did Noah know about how to live? Did he know how to live? Did he know right from wrong? Did he know, if you want to look at it this way, did he know Torah? Not the written Torah, but did he have instructions from God that he knew that was right from wrong? Yes. Do you think that maybe he taught his children right from wrong? Okay. So that means that on down the line, you have the ites, okay? Compare that to the words of Paul in Romans. In Romans 1, where he writes, no one is without no one has an excuse about your knowledge of God and your knowledge of what is right and wrong. Okay? So that means nobody's innocent. People say, well, they killed all these innocent people. Are you kidding? I'm not even innocent. All right? Maybe if you look at my life compared to their life, you would go, yeah, your life is a lot better, but it ain't innocent. All right? So anyway, that's kind of what I got from reading it and where we are, is we have done exactly what Israel did.
So it started with God deciding that he didn't like things going on the earth, and he decided to wipe out everybody except Noah and his sons and his wife and their wives. And after he did that, he said, okay, guys, I'm not going to ever do this again. Not going to wipe you out with water. Darn, now I got to figure out another way to do this. Son of a gun.
I'll get Israel to do it. Well, you said something in there, and it clicked something in my mind, so I want you to think about this, okay? Now, I haven't read the Hebrew on this, so I don't know if this is an English oops or if this is this way in the Hebrew. You mentioned God wanted to wipe out everybody except Noah. And I believe the way that it reads, God wanted to wipe out everybody. But there was a Noah. So now what am I going to do, right? Well, I'm not going to wipe out Noah. Okay? So we're going to have a new beginning. Is what we're going to have. So Noah is like Adam 2.0. Right? Yeshua is Adam 29.0. Something like that. All right. One more.
Okay, well, it may not be canonical, if that's a word, but in Jasher it mentions that land was actually set aside for the sons of Shem. Ham was supposed to go into Africa, and the Canaanites and whoever decided, no, we want to stay here.
How about that?
That was part of, at least that's what it says. So
Yeah.
for what that's worth.
Yeah. Good. Thank you. Well, it's late. Read the rest. Read your notes. Write what you want. Read the reading. Definitely read the reading. Is there anything else that anybody would like to bring up tonight? Whew, I survived having Skip Moen in the class. Anyway, all right. Bless all of you in the name of Jehovah. You are blessed. Walk with him, and we'll see you Friday night. Okay, have a great week. Good night, everybody online.